In this video, I'm going to show you how to determine the best leverage to use for your trading account. Roll the intro. Hello and welcome to the Pine Street Capital YouTube channel where we talk all things trading and investing. My name is Ron and I'm the managing partner of Pine Street Capital. I've been trading for over 6 years and today we're going to be talking about leverage and margin. What is the best leverage to use for your trading account? So in order to really understand this, you need to know what margin and leverage are. And the very first thing I can tell you about them is they're two sides of the exact same coin. So the definition of margin and leverage is best illustrated by an example whereby, say for example, I need to go and buy a $100,000 house, right? But I don't have $100,000, so what am I going to do? I am going to go to a bank and I am going to tell the bank, can you please lend me $100,000 to buy this house, right? And what's the bank going to do? The bank is going to tell me, okay, fine, we'll lend you this money, but you need to put down a deposit, right? You need to put down a deposit for us to lend you 100K, and you need to put down a 20% deposit. So 20% of $100,000, I need to put down a deposit of $20,000, right? So that $20,000 is what the bank will hold on to just in case I don't pay off my debt, right? And that is what margin is. That deposit that the bank or the broker holds on to is margin, right? So once I've deposited that margin, the bank then gives me access to that 100K, right? So with that 100K, what do I then go and do? I then go and buy that house, and once I've bought that house, then say for example a year from now, the value of the house has increased to $200,000, right? So I sell the house for $200,000. I'm holding $200,000 in cash right now. What am I going to do with that $200,000? I am going to use $100,000 of that money to pay the bank back their 100K that they lent me, right? And once I pay them back that amount, they are then going to give me back the margin that I deposited in order to get access to that capital. So essentially in that scenario, I'm now sitting in a $100,000 profit because the difference between what I bought the house for and what I sold the house for is $100,000. 200K minus 100K, right? So I've made a 100K profit and now I've got my deposit back. So now my balance, or the balance in my account, is equal to $120,000, right? So I've essentially made $100,000 using my $20,000 deposit. My leverage ratio in that case, what I'd say is the 100K that the bank lent me divided by the 5K that I initially deposited on that house. So that gives you 5 times leverage, right? So essentially, I'm sure you can already see now that if, say for example, I put down a 20K deposit and the bank was willing to lend me $1 million, right, rather than 100K, then I'd obviously have more debt with the bank, and in that case I would have to pay back $1 million. But what is the leverage ratio in that case? The leverage ratio in that case would be $1 million divided by my good faith deposit of $20,000, and that gives you 50 times, right? So that's 50 to 1 or 50 times leverage, right? So that is what leverage is in a nutshell, and margin is essentially the percentage of the deposit to the amount that you've been lent. So essentially, if you deposit $100 with a brokerage, right, that broker is going to give you leverage of, these days it can be as high as 2,000 to 1, some unlimited to 1, and we'll get into what that actually means later on. So if you deposit $100 in a brokerage account, right, and your leverage is 10 to 1, then that means for that $100 the broker is willing to allow you to control 10 times the amount you initially deposited. So that's 10 times $100, which is $1,000, right? For a $100 deposit, if your broker gives you 100 to 1 leverage, then for that $100 deposit, your broker is allowing you to control $10,000, right? And for 1,000 times leverage, your broker is, for that $100, allowing you to control $100,000 in capital, right? So us as traders actually use leverage in order to make a significant return out of very little capital, right? So essentially, going back to the whole house analogy, whereby the bank takes $20,000 as a good faith deposit, and in that example I sold the house for a profit. I essentially made 100k out of 20k, rather than, you know, the other case, say I was still, the house was still to double in value, but instead of going to the bank and making that deposit, say I bought the house cash for 20k, right, and the house doubled in value, then I've only made 20k profit as opposed to the 100k. So that's why us as traders actually use leverage. We use leverage so that we can make something huge out of little capital at the end of the day. So the one thing that you need to understand about leverage is it's a two-edged sword, right? So as much as you can make money a lot quicker and in larger quantities, you can also lose money quicker in large quantities, right? So in the example with the house, say we put down $20,000 deposit and we got 100k to buy the house. We buy the house for 100k. Then in that case, we bought a house for 100k. A year from now, the house decreases in value, right? It's now worth 80k. So we've made a loss of 20k based on the amount that the bank has lent us. So we then sell that house for 80k, right? And we're holding 80k in cash, but we owe the bank 100, right? So we owe the bank 100, so essentially we then pay the bank back $80,000, right? And after we pay them $80,000, the bank is still like, hang on, you owe me another $20,000, right? So you either have to go into your own pocket and give them that additional $20,000, or they just keep your deposit. So essentially, in that case, you've lost your money very fast. It's as if the house went to zero, right? So say for example, you don't have the money in your pocket. What the bank then does is they just keep your deposit, and that's it. That deposit then covers the 100k. That's the reason the bank takes on your deposit in order to cover whatever potential liability could result from them lending you money. Now, taking this back to brokers, they do the exact same thing. So when you deposit money with your broker, I'm sure if you've opened a trading account before, you'll see that the broker will ask you, how much leverage do you want on this account? Do you want 1-to-1 leverage? Do you want 2-to-1 leverage? Do you want 3-to-1 leverage? Do you want 50-to-1 leverage? Do you want 100? Do you want 1,000-to-1 leverage, right? So that leverage is essentially what that question, how much leverage do you want, actually means is how much money do you want us to lend you? Do you want us to lend you a lot of money for a very little deposit? Or do you want us to lend you a little bit of money based on your deposit, right? So the higher you go, the more you're asking them to lend you. And the more you're asking them to lend you, the more risk you're potentially taking on. Because for example, if you go into a brokerage and you have $100, right? And they offer you 2,000 to 1 leverage. And there are a lot of brokers that will offer you a lot more than this. So with your $100, what 2,000 to 1 leverage will essentially do is it allows you to control 2,000 times your $100, right? So that is what? Let me do the math. 1,000, 2 zeros, $100,000, right? So you've come in into the brokerage with $100, and they said, oh no, we are willing to lend you $200,000 based on that. I'm sure you can then you're starting to ask yourself, hang on, why would a complete stranger be willing to lend me $200,000 after I only deposit $100 into the account, right? And that is where the ethics of B-book brokers actually come into, because the more leverage you're taking on in your account, the more risk you're taking on, and the more risk you're taking on, the higher potential return, but at the same time, the higher the likelihood that you lose all of your money is. And B-book brokers know that 90% of traders are going to lose money. So if we offer them higher leverage, then that means they just lose their money even quicker and even easier, right? So if your broker is offering you 1,000 to 1 leverage, 2,000 to 1 leverage, 1 to unlimited leverage, right? Those leverage options are meant for the stupid traders who are actually naive enough to then actually think that a stranger is willing to lend them $200,000 based off a $100 deposit for absolutely nothing, right? Imagine this broker has not even done a credit check on you and they're willing to lend you $200,000 after you've deposited $100. Come on. Why else would they be willing to do that? Anyone within the lending business knows there's way too much credit risk involved, i.e. you're never going to be able to pay them back if they lend you $200,000 based on $100. So why would they do it? They do it because they're not actually hedging all of your trades. They do this so that you blow your account even quicker, right? So if you are using 2,000 times leverage that your broker is giving you, then good luck. Because if you put on, say, a 2-lot trade with $100, you have absolutely no business doing that, you know? And the broker knows that you have no business putting a 2-lot trade on. And this is where it really gets extremely dangerous for traders, and they don't even realize this. You'll see that the disclaimer at the bottom of a lot of brokers' websites actually says that you can lose more capital than you initially deposited. But it's in really small print and no one ever goes down to read all of that. So essentially, if a broker lends you $200,000, right, based off your $100 deposit, and you decide to put on a 2-lot trade, right, and the market moves, say it's NFP and the market moves 50 pips against you, right, that's a $500 loss that you've made in seconds, right? And guess what? Your balance actually goes to negative 400 because you have your initial margin in there. But your balance then goes immediately, within seconds. This has happened before at the non-farm payroll release, right? Your balance immediately goes to negative $400. Guess what? You have to pay the broker back that $400 that you borrowed from them, right? And that's the reason they have that extra high leverage. They have that extra high leverage so that things like that happen and you end up owing them money, and you even lose the money that you initially deposited even faster, right? That's why they have such high leverage. So if you're going to take on leverage, you need to approach this industry like a professional, right? As a professional trader, why on earth would you be putting a 2-lot trade on with $100, right? Professional traders don't do that. As a professional trader, you honestly don't need 1,000 times leverage. You don't need 500 times leverage. You don't need 100 times leverage, right? Those leverage ratios are for stupid retail traders, right? As for us, the smarter retail traders, almost professional traders, what we do, we never even consider any leverage above 1 to 100. Even 1 to 100 is high, right? And as for us, anything below 1 to 100 is fine. But I'd strongly suggest you leverage your account probably 1 to 30. 1 to 30 is round about where a lot of traders need to be leveraged. And if you even look at how the industry's evolved over the past few years, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but in Europe, right, they actually restricted leverage for CFD brokers to 1 to 30. That's why you see a lot of CFD brokers are shutting down their business in Europe and in the UK, because they know that, geez, if these traders can only leverage their accounts 30 to 1, then that means we can't capture any of those stupid guys who are going to leverage 1,000 to 1, right? So they're completely shutting down their UK and European operations, because now traders are restricted on their leverage, and that is a good thing because they lose less money, right? So brokers, a lot of them are not interested in Europe anymore because they can't take advantage of the more naive retail traders, right? That's why they're now moving to most of their efforts towards Africa, because in Africa we don't have limits on leverage, right? That's why they're making use of their offshore licenses, because with their offshore licenses they can offer that 1,000 to 1 leverage that the naive retail trader is going to take on, right? And they can do that freely without fear of regulation. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be taking on leverage that high, then you're probably going to end up blowing your account. So look at leverage of 100 to 1, 30 to 1. I obviously can't tell you what to do within your own trading account, but then if you're looking to take on leverage, the smart thing is anything below 100 to 1, I'd suggest you probably stick to round about 30 to 1. But you know, if you're doing a type of trading style whereby you want to deposit a small amount and then have a daily risk limit or a weekly risk limit, and that's all that's in your account, then maybe you can take on higher leverage, but at the same time you are really at risk of going into a negative balance, right? The last thing you want to do is get into debt because of trading, right? And that has happened before. It's happened multiple times. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a story that happened in the US whereby this one young trader, he was 20 years old or something like that, and he actually committed suicide because he leveraged his account way too high, and he was now $700,000 in debt, right? This then turned out to be a mistake because he shouldn't have been allowed that leverage in the first place. But those are the kinds of situations that can happen if you leverage way too high. So keep your leverage low and trade responsibly, because the higher the leverage you take on, the more risk you're in of actually going into a negative balance, right? So that's leverage in a nutshell. If you like this kind of content, please smash the like button and subscribe to the Pine Street Capital YouTube channel. And if you'd like to see more content just like this, I've linked the most powerful video training that I've ever published right over here. So this is the video you definitely want to watch next. I promise you, the perspective that you have on trading will not be the same after you watch this video. Take care.